Good evening. Welcome to Larry Rinker Golf Live. I'm pleased to be joined this evening by top 100 teacher, Bill Harmon. How you doing, Billy?
I'm doing great, Larry. Thanks for having me on.
Always great to have you on. You and I have been friends. Holy cow.
Long time.
I'll be a PGA Tour member 40 years in June. So,
Oh, how about so? So that would be early 80s.
yeah, that would be
So
early.
we met when I caddied on tour. So that's how long we've been chasing the white ball in one form or another.
Yep. So you're from the famous Harmon family. Your father won the 1948 Masters. Your brother, Butch, Claude Jr., and Dick, and your other brother, Craig. So I mean, what a family, what a history. Grew up playing Winged Foot. You've been around. You've been to the Masters 30 times. Wow, what a legacy.
You know, I think about it a lot more as I've gotten older, how lucky we've been. And I don't say this with ego, but when I look at what my dad achieved, what Butch has achieved, what Craig has achieved, Dick when he was alive, and whatever I've achieved, I don't know what that is. And now Claude, it's like really weird. You know, it's like, wow, how did that happen? And how did all of us get involved in this? And certainly we had great opportunity with the, you know, being Claude's son and then the last name, but you know, that gets you in the room, but that doesn't mean you can furnish the room, you know. So I've always been very proud of the fact that, probably like your family also, we were all workaholics and we've all worked very hard. And so I don't think either any of us have ever felt entitled. I think if anything, we felt more responsibility because of who we were. So, and it's the same, you know, look at what your family's accomplished, has been terrific. And you can look back on it now and your sister and your brother and yourself and go, man, this has been a pretty cool ride. Because when you're in the middle of it, you don't really think of it as being cool. But when you get older and you reflect back on it, you say, wow, boy, look what golf has done for me. What's done for our Harmon family or the Rinker family. And as much as you've contributed, your family, tremendous achievements in golf. The game has done a lot more for us than we've ever done for it. I guarantee that.
No, and you and I teaching now, we're kind of paying back. We're serving the industry, and we're helping people to play better golf. And, you know, I just think I feel so blessed to have done what I was able to do. You know, I look back and think, how did I do what I did? But
that's right. Yeah. It's pretty cool.
It is pretty incredible what what the Rinkers were kind of able to do, but it's
and still doing, I might add, which is even
and still doing. We're still, you know, teaching. Lori's teaching, Lee's teaching. So, you know, all of us are doing our part, and you know, it's really kind of fun. It's kind of cool the way everything is kind of transitioned, and we're just enjoying the latter years of our life now.
Well, you look at your family, my family, throw the Stocktons in there.
Yeah.
Now the Summer Hayes family is doing tremendous stuff in golf. You know, Tony Finau's teacher and his kids are winning every tournament. And so it's really cool, I think, because I think unbeknownst to all of us, you know, you and your sister and brother, you didn't set out to what all of a sudden we can sit here now and say, man, how about this stuff, you know? And so I'm very humbled by it. I'll tell a quick story. I had a tremendous desire to go to the Open at Winged Foot this year. Initially, I got hired by Fox to do the TV. For the first time in sports history, a major event was change networks about 6 weeks before the tournament. So I had the shortest announcing career ever. But I still wanted to go, and I thought my members could get me some passes. Well, I forgot it was COVID, you know, so they said the only way you can go is to volunteer. Would I volunteer? I said, you bet, I want to be there. So I was sitting in front of the terrace here at Winged Foot one day, and with some of the dignitaries of the club and some of my friends, and one of the guys that I didn't know, who had run the event from the Winged Foot side, said, why would you come all the way to Winged Foot from California to volunteer? And I said, I didn't come here to volunteer. I came here to say thanks and to tell Wingfoot that I love you. Because if Craig would not have hired my dad in 1941 as an assistant pro, there's no doubt in my mind you'd never heard of any of us. So to me, it all started at Wingfoot. So for me to go back there last year, I volunteered 8 straight days. Went in the volunteer tent and everybody said, what are you volunteering for? I said, I'm not volunteering, man. I'm having the time of my life, you know? And this is where it all began. So I came back there to say thanks. Because without Wingfoot, you'd have never heard of us. So I think as you get older, you look back on some of the people you knew, the breaks you got. And I think it's very important to be appreciative and remember where you came from.
No, that's a great story and a great tribute. Larry Rinker Golf Live is on Thursday, 7:30 to 8 p.m. Eastern. We have some sad news tonight. Brad Brewer, top 100 teacher, lost his battle with cancer. He was 60 years old. He will be dearly missed, and thoughts and prayers go out to Brad and his family. And there is Bill Harmon, my guest tonight, top 100 teacher. And Billy, when I look at this picture of all these different swings, you know, you hear people say, well, the modern swing now, they all look the same, but
yeah, well,
but
I love that picture, by the way. I love it. I absolutely love that picture. First thing I see when I see that picture is talent. A lot of talent, boy. A lot of talent. But as you know, there's a lot of ways to do it. You were tutored by one of the all-time greats, Bob Toski, who still has teachings today that I think will stand the test of time forever.
Agreed.
Connection to the club is the hands, you know.
Right.
And I tell people all the time, you give me a new player with bad hands, then you give me a good player with good hands, or a bad player with good hands. I know who's going to end up being better.
Right.
The one who's got the good hands, because that's the connection to the club. So nowadays we talk about so many different things, which are important, by the way. But at the end of the day, it's all to stabilize the club face.
Right.
At the end of the day, I think that's what we try to do as teachers, is to find a way to get the club face in the path reasonable so people can play reasonable golf.
No, and it's pretty neat that we can measure it now, that we know what the path and club face are. I had a couple gentlemen. I had one yesterday that was swinging 8 to the right.
Yeah.
And, I had one that
13 to the left.
I had one today that was this afternoon that was swinging 8 to the right. So, and the one swinging 8 to both of them, what do you think happened? You think they topped it swinging 8 to the right?
A lot of drop kicks, a lot of.
Right.
And the less loft they had, the less loft they had, the less chance they had of getting it airborne. I know that because I'm a shallow swinger.
I would think you are kind of like me in that when you get in situations like that, you go back to kind of your early training. I go back to my Bob Toski training. I bet you go back to your dad's training.
Every lesson I've ever given.
And you go back to the arms control the path, and you got to swing more left. And then your hands control the face, and you just go back to basic stuff that your dad taught you and Bob Toski taught me.
I had one today that swung too far inside out. Pretty good player, 5 or 6 handicap, couldn't hit a fade. And I've been fooling around. I have flight scope. I've been fooling around with the spin axis.
Okay.
And so I told him a story that I heard Crenshaw say one time, as you know, is not one of the game's great technicians. When he wanted to hit a fade, he imagined the golf ball was a multicolored beach ball. And he wanted the colors spinning to the right. And when he wanted to hit a hook, he wanted them spinning to the left. So I explained to this guy. And I said, I don't care how you do it. See if you can get this ball to spin to the right. And the very first shot he hit went straight. As you know, an inside out hooker, if they try to slice it, they'll hit it straight.
Right.
And he says, well, what was I supposed to do? I said, well, you just did it. More importantly, I didn't tell you how, you see. So,
right.
I said, some of these older players that might not have been technicians were actually geniuses in the way they saw the game.
Right.
So how are you going to get the ball spinning that way if you're 10 degrees to the right? You know, it's going to be hard.
Right.
And so I've been fooling a lot with some of the different information we get, having fun with it. And, but at the end of the day, if you can teach people to change with less thinking, then you really got something. So I'm
No,
always
I
trying to
totally
learn.
agree.
My brother Craig calls it thoughtless teaching.
I like
Get them to
that.
do some without telling them how to do it, you know?
Well, it was kind of, I had the same thing. This guy swinging into out 8 right. I said, can you hit the ground? And he's like talking about his back. I said,
No.
just hit the ground.
Gravity, or goes up, must come down.
I'm not going to tell you anything. I just want the club to hit the ground when you swing, because you haven't hit the ground yet.
And I bet they can figure out a way to do it, you know?
Right.
At least they should be able to.
Well,
But
it's interesting that you say that about the beach ball, because I think I'm always asking my students, well, what sports have you played? And when I hear somebody say, well, I played soccer, I'm thinking, great. They did nothing with their arms, hands, and wrists, but they understand spin.
exactly right.
So if you start talking about spin like you, that beach ball,
Yeah, the spin axis.
all of a sudden that guy said, oh, and next thing you knew, he made that swing. And, you know, it reminds me of what Bob Toski told me. Sam Snead said to him, he said, Mouse, he said, you know, I always feel like I'm cutting it a little bit to hit it straight.
Well, when I was caddying on tour and I would watch you guys, and I didn't know this at the time, but a great percentage of you, I know Jay did it, his divot would go slightly left and the ball would kind of start right and go straight. I'm looking at this, like, what the heck's going on here?
Right.
You know? And Jay was never a technician. So I asked him what he felt like at impact. And he had this feeling, he said, I feel like my left arm's moving down and in. So that's interesting. So then I finally figured out that the divot is after the ball, and the ball is now staying on the arc, let's say.
Right.
And then when I would walk on par 3 tees, I'd always walk to the right of the tee. I'd start looking at the divots as I walked by, and I'd see where the pin was, you know. And this isn't meant to be a criticism, but I always knew where Dan Pohl's divot was because it was 100 yards to the left. And Dave Rummel's was 100 yards to the right. So I was always looking for their 2 divots because they were going the opposite way.
That is so funny. Well, you know, there's so many clues that can help all of us get better. And
Yeah.
you're talking about the divot clues. So there's
This
other
was
clues
before we
like
had all the measurements, so we didn't know about
Right.
all this stuff. So I'm just observing, you know. And Curtis, who played a lot with Jay, his divots went a little bit to the left. And I asked him what he thought about. He said, cover it with your right side. Well, that was the same thing Jay said. He just used a different term and a different. Bob Golby, Jay's uncle, who fought a hook his whole life. I asked him one time, do you remember what you were thinking when you won the Masters? He said, yeah, I missed the cut before and I was snap hooking everything. And I went to Augusta on Sunday before and I was trying to hit my left knee with my left hand on the forward swing. And I looked up and every ball went straight. And he said that swing thought lasted a week and a half. But I said it lasted for a pretty good week because you won the Masters with it.
Wow. Well, that's the way it is. I mean, but you know, back when you're talking about when we were looking at divots in the 80s, we believed at that point in time that the initial flight of the ball was due to the path, not the club face. And now
It's
we
interesting
know.
because my dad used to say, you know, not having the measurements, just the digging it out of the dirt stuff. He always said the ball went where the club face told it. So he was 75% right, basically. Is I guess our technology today, we go at 75-25 ratio of.
Well, they
face
say
to path.
75 kind of overall. Obviously,
Yeah.
a driver with the less loft, the more the face controls.
Correct,
start
correct,
direction.
yeah. So he thought.
Driver's about 85%, a putter's about 93.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
But by and large, he wasn't far off.
no,
He used to say club face is king, you know?
right. Well, I believe it is. But
I think, well, he said it's the only thing hitting the ball, so he started that conversation because I asked him one day, I said, Dad, you never really seem to hit a wild shot. You didn't even hit bad shots, but none of them that start 30 yards off line and keep going. And he said, well, I know where the club face is throughout my swing. I didn't even know what that meant, you know?
Right.
Later on, I said, what did you mean by that? He said, well, Bill, you know, it's the only thing that hits the ball. It might behoove you to know where it is.
Your dad was tough on you.
Well, he told the truth, though. That was a true statement, right? It might
Right.
be helpful to know where the club face is because that's what's hitting the ball. So, and that's what in many ways I took from what I've read about Mr. Toski, you know, and because my dad felt the same way. He felt that something had to be in control of club face.
Right.
And in his case, it was the back of the left hand.
Right.
Trevino was a back of the left hand guy. I'd say Nicholas had the look of a back of the left hand.
Right.
Irwin had that look, you know, and so that was his connection. He felt some part of your body has to be in charge of the club face. You just can't swing and hope the earth comes underneath it. You know, that good
Right.
players and control the ball and everybody else, the ball controls them.
Well, and I think your dad grew up in the era with Ben Hogan. He was good friends with Ben Hogan, played a lot of golf with him. And Hogan really wanted to be able to try and duck hook it, and the ball couldn't go left. So he used that left arm, and this is what Toski taught me. If you keep speed in the left arm going through impact, you can try and hook it, and it's impossible if the left arm keeps speed. That's the way they would say it. We now know today, thanks to 3D, the left arm slowing down.
Absolutely, it does.
So basically, we know those guys said, don't let it slow down as much. Try and keep speed in it. Try and get your hands further forward when you hit the golf ball. And if you do that, you can stand on the 18th tee at Pebble Beach and it's not going left.
That was their feeling. I remember Jackie Burke told me that, of course, everybody had a different version of what Hogan did.
Right.
But Jackie said he felt that Hogan's left arm went left quicker than anybody after impact.
And that's the same thing Toski said.
Same stuff, you know. And so I think we're trying to put new fins on old Cadillacs, you know, and the fact of the matter is a lot of this stuff that we now know today, those guys kind of figured it out on their own. Now, they might not have done exactly what they were saying, as you said, keep the left going. But it gave them some connection with the club face. And my dad used to say that good players start the ball where they want to start it.
Right.
And if you can't start the ball where you want to, then visualizing the correct shot is no longer going to work. If you're trying to start in the left bunker and you start it to the right of the right bunker, well, that's good visualization. But if you're 10 degrees out to the right, pal, it might not start in that left bunker.
Well, in the era of the 70s and the slide and drop it under and the reverse C and hitting a draw, in the 80s when I was on tour, you know, the whole thing was if the draw wasn't working, aim left and block it around the golf course.
Correct.
Like did, or Bruce Litsky. And that was like plan B. And
but the other thing is there was a lot of guys that played good that way.
Yeah.
A lot of guys that played good. You know, there's a lot of the teachers today never saw Jack play.
Right.
You and I saw it.
Right.
They never saw Weisskopf hit a golf ball.
Right.
You know, they never saw Weisskopf hit a high cut with a 1-iron. And now you tell me that
shut face.
You tell me that's a bad swing. You know, when you see the quality of the shots that some of these guys hit with what is now thought of as to be a very bad swing. Well, I don't know about that because the ball tells me if the swing is good or not. You know, Bruce Litsky.
Right.
Who copied him? Irwin was an in and over guy, you know.
Right.
Craig Stadler was an in and over guy.
Mark
An
Levy.
underrated player, you know, for about 6-7 years. So there's a lot of ways to do it. You know, you look at the Masters, a lot of different swings there were in the hunt, you know. And what do they all do? They figure out a way to get the club head relatively on the path and the squareness to what they want to do, you know, and they do it differently. You know, Brian Harmon's got a little bit of an old school looking swing to me.
Yeah.
But it looks like it's got a lot of savvy, a lot of naturalness to it. But his coach, you know, Jack Lumpkin, is an old school guy, probably.
Well, and he's been playing some pretty darn good golf. He got pretty deep in the Dell match play.
Yes, he did.
So Brian Harmon he's, the guy's won on tour, I look at a guy like Ryan Palmer. He's played the tour for 20 years. I think he's won 4 times. The guy's had an incredible career. Anybody can keep their card for 20 years. That's an impressive stat to have.
Who's done that just maybe, I don't know if it's 20, but close, Pat Perez.
Yeah.
Pat Perez has never lost his card, and people don't realize how good that is. They have no idea. I was watching the Players Championship, and Jay texted me something. He said, I didn't know this because Jay doesn't think this way. Said a friend of mine texted me that you played in the Players Championship 5 different decades, Jay. Think about that. 5 different decades. Because he got the 5th one when he won the senior players.
Right.
So he got to play in 2010. So that was the 5th decade. But as you know, you have to recertify to keep your card. They don't give you exemptions on it.
No.
Anybody that's played that long is really, really good.
You have to earn it the old-fashioned way, by performance.
How many cuts did you make in your career?
283.
So I was talking, Mike Donald's made over 300. That's something to be proud of.
Right.
The amount of cuts that you've made is something to be very, very proud of. Jay's number is stupid, 590.
He's like, it's either he or Mark Brooks that have the most, I think.
He does. Jay does.
Jay does.
Jay beat Kite. Kite had it, and then Jay made it when he made the cut at the Open at Wingfoot in 2006, and he was 52 years old. And the only reason he tried to qualify is he played in his first Open there in 74. Said, I went to Columbus with the Tour Pros. I knew he wouldn't make it. I just thought I'd give it a try. And he said, and I made it, made the cut. And then they told me I just broke the cut record. And he said, okay.
Wow.
He said, Thomas never once said a word to him about it. Never said, come on, Jay, that's one of my only records. Nothing. 0 zip, nothing. So you don't think they're not competitive?
Oh, they're still competitive. And I know Kite's 70 like you are. And Jay's not quite that old, but he's what, 67, 66?
He'll be 68 later this year.
Yeah. So he's creeping up on it. But, Billy, to me, I just feel that the game of golf, really, to learn it, you better know what, as you say, that club face is doing, and that's your hands. And then you better understand what your arms are doing, because that's going to have huge influence over the path of the club. And I just think this whole idea that the big muscles control the little muscles, well, you might have a time in your life where you feel that and you think, okay, that helped me play a little better golf. But you learned how to do this with these arms, hands, and wrist probably a long time ago, almost to the point where you even forgot that you learned how to do that. And
well, I think the big muscle swing is fine for the elite expert player after they've already learned how to use their hands and arms.
Right.
But for the most part, the amateur that does it can't get over the top of it quick enough, thinking of the big muscles.
Right.
And so I think it's one of those terms that, as you know, Larry, you and I teach just normal golfers.
Right.
And yet there's so much credit given, and I say Butch or whoever the guys that teach the tour player, but they're not the real teachers, in my opinion. And I mean that sincerely. The real teachers are like yourself, my brother Craig, or whatever, your sister or your brother, that can take a 20 handicap to a 12. That's a real teacher. A 15 to a 9. That's a real teacher. And so, I got a lot of credit for being with Jay and Bill Haas. They were good before I ever met them.
Right.
What I did with both of them is I didn't ruin them, and I never took away their feel system. So I knew what they did when they played well. No one would teach Jay's swing when you were out there whipping that thing outside and looking like Michael Jackson coming into the ball. You look like you got his first lesson from Elvis Presley, legs driving, and he did everything and hit fades. You look at that swing and say, wait a minute, he's going to hook it. He never hooked it. And so I was fortunate enough to work with some good players, but the thing that I did is I didn't ruin them. I knew that I didn't have to put my stamp on them because they were already good.
Well, I would say this, Billy, and this is what Toski said, was with good players, you just tweak them.
Mm-hmm.
with the players you're talking about, we have to teach them how to play golf.
They got no tweaking going on, boy. They're gonna
Yeah, because so you
You know,
really
on that subject, thought it was very odd that Rory Mcelroy changed coaches 2 or 3 weeks before the Masters. And I like Peter Cowan. He's brilliant. His record speaks for itself. This is
Right.
not in any way, shape, or form anything against Peter Cowan. But boy, can you imagine playing that course, working on new swing in the Masters when it's your chance to win the Grand Slam? I don't know. There's just something about it. I thought it was wait a couple weeks, you know, he got enough feel to get it around. Guy was
well,
one of
there's
the most
players,
beautiful
Billy,
field
that are
players I
better.
ever saw.
There's players better at shutting the brain off and just going to play. And you've been on that practice tee at the Masters on the Tuesday and Wednesday and even Thursday morning when the players out there with their coach and they're yelling and screaming at them, this isn't working.
I remember caddying for Jay, and I think we're at the LA Open, and he was on the range Wednesday afternoon in the PG after the Pro-Am. He wasn't hitting it good. He goes, boy, this is really bugging me. He says, this just isn't going to work at Augusta. And I said, Jay, well, it's January. The Masters in April. He says, I don't care. I got to go in there playing good. I don't want to be finding it on the range. I want to go there having something, and then I can do the rest. But if you don't think these players don't think about that, we were at the LA Open in January, and he's talking about
Golly,
the
that's a
Masters.
long time.
But that shows you how much it meant to him to maybe not have to do what Rory was doing.
Right.
Because he knew he wouldn't be able to play there trying something new on 12 when the wind's howling. You know, yeah, let's try this new swing, thought Jay, on 11 when the wind's blowing and you got a 3-iron into that back left pin. This would be a good time to test it.
Well, I think your brother Butch has done an incredible job with the stable of players he's worked with. Probably 40 years now. You know, I look at Dustin Johnson, shut-face player. I really believe, without even talking to you or Butch about it, that he basically taught him where he needed to aim so that his club was traveling pretty much where he wanted the ball to go, and taught him to hit the ball straight or a little fade.
Plus, that's the way our father played. And if you think about, I read years ago, Judy Rankin talking about
with
Toski, he couldn't change that grip. So he just said, keep the knuckles up.
Right.
Right. So
Toski
that's great teaching.
Well, and
that's great teaching.
Toski told the story that he had the green superintendent come out and put a flagstick on the right side of the green on a hole where the wind was blowing right to left. And they went out to that hole and he made her try to hit cuts into that back right hole location with the wind blowing right to left. And I've asked Toski this, and I said, I bet that's the first time you ever did that with somebody with a really strong grip. And he said, yes. And you know what he did? He taught outside the box. He worked with who he had in front of him. And because of that, Judy Rankin's in the Hall of Fame.
I was an inside-out hooker as a kid, and my dad used to take me to the 8th hole of the West course at Winged Foot. It was a big dogleg right. He put the balls on the far right-hand side of the range, so I had the tee, so I had no place to start a hook. And he said, now let me see you play this hole with your swing. Well, I couldn't. And so he did the same thing Bob did. But he actually gave you a visual too. You see, I had to kind of,
right.
So I didn't realize how much I had to open up. I didn't realize how much I had to change my path. Tweaking it on the range wouldn't have worked. He had to put me in a situation where I could not do it my way.
Well, and I think
a barrier that I had no chance.
I think that's always great. I try to do that in short game lessons. I'll say to people, what are you struggling with? I've got a bag of balls. Let's set up the shot that you need to work on. And then we can work on it. So at least you have the visuals going. And that's so great. You know, what your dad did and what Toski did and what Butch did with Dustin Johnson. But the thing I love about your brother Butch, if I look at all the people he's worked with through the years, I don't see two swings that look alike.
You can't tell that Butch taught him.
Right.
And this isn't a knock on any of the other teachers, but there's probably a handful of them. You and I could go to the tournament this week at Hilton Head, and I'd say, Larry, who teaches this guy? And you'd say, that's so-and-so. And you'd say, right. Bill, who teaches that guy? Well, that's obviously this guy. And then you'll see Maverick McNeely and you say, who teaches this guy? Well, I don't really know. Oh, it's Butch.
Right.
So, but that was the info that you got from Bob, that info that we got from our dad. My dad had a great line: you can't teach talent, but you can mess it up. So be very careful working with talented people because they're already good.
Right.
Jay Haas was already good when I met him. Bill Haas was good when he was 3 years old. And
Well, I
so
think
why
with
would
good
you want to
players,
mess this up?
with good players, we get the path and the face where they need it to hit the shot shape that fits their eye. And you just figure out what's the easiest way for them to do it.
And they can do it, you see,
Right.
because they're cats.
Yeah.
And I'm a dog.
They can
They
do
can
it.
do it.
Well, Billy, it's been great having you
Thanks,
on
Larry.
the show. Here's this slide again with all these different swings.
I love it.
I would just say find your natural swing. My new book's out, The Journeyman. You can pick that up at larryrinker.com. And I'd like to thank my sponsors, Titleist FootJoy, the Ritz-Carlton Golf Club Orlando, and the Red Sky Golf Academy in Vail, Colorado. Also Flight Scope and V1 Sports and Right Balance. So Billy, always
Thanks,
great
Larry.
to catch up with you.
Always great.
And hey, keep doing what you're doing, buddy.
I don't know how to do it any other way, my man. Take
All
care.
right.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Till
Bye.
next Thursday, keep swinging.